You know the feeling. You sit down to try something totally new, and that little voice in your head starts whispering, "You don't belong here. You are a fraud, and they are about to find out." Well, guess what? You're not an imposter. You're just dealing with a kind of biological friction we call the competence gap. And we're going to break down exactly why your brain punishes you for learning, and more importantly, how to shut that voice up for good. I mean, really think about it. You finally land that promotion, or you unbox that expensive camera you swore you were going to learn how to use. You're all set to go, and then this cold wave just washes over you. You look at the blank page or the new equipment, and your brain just screams, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. It feels like you snuck in through the back door, and at any second, security is going to show up and expose you. Right, so the official term for this is imposter syndrome. But let's be real for a minute. Has anyone at all, ever actually walked up to you, tapped you on the shoulder, and called you a fraud to your face? Almost certainly not. And you know why? Because, like in all the best horror movies, the call is coming from inside the house. Now, you probably assume all this anxiety means you aren't ready, that you're not good enough. But what if I told you that feeling has nothing to do with you failing? Turns out, it's just a predictable biological glitch. So let's deconstruct it. The first thing you have to do is stop making this a moral issue. Feeling like an imposter doesn't mean you have low self esteem. It means you have a human brain that is aggressively, almost desperately trying to conserve calories. Seriously, that's it. This slide lays it out perfectly. Think of your brain as an efficiency engine. Look at those two columns. On the left, you've got old habits. That's an automated highway. It's like scrolling on your phone or driving a route you've taken 1,000 times. It takes literally zero effort. But on the right, a new skill is an unpaved dirt road. Your brain has to get out the pickaxe and shovel and carve a whole new path from scratch. That's hard labor, and it costs a massive amount of energy. And your brain hates burning that much energy. So when you sit down to learn, it pulls the fire alarm to try and stop you. It floods you with doubt. It tells you you're a fake. Your brain isn't actually evaluating your skill. It's throwing a biological tantrum to get you to do something easier. You're mistaking a biological do not disturb sign for a final verdict on your worth. So, okay, that's the energy saving part. But here's where it gets even weirder, where the paradox really kicks in. And it's all explained by this fascinating psychological principle. Your logic probably tells you, hey, if I were actually good at this, I'd feel confident. But psychology, it proves the exact opposite is true. This brings us to the first half of something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it basically says this: truly incompetent people often feel supremely confident. Why? Because they don't just lack the skill, they lack the self awareness to even recognize their own lack of skill. A true fraud doesn't feel like a fraud, they're just blissfully ignorant. And here is the other side of that coin, the part that's probably hitting home for you. The moment you actually start to learn something, you also learn enough to see the vast, towering mountain of knowledge you have yet to climb. And that awareness, that gap between where you are and your new understanding of mastery, that is precisely what triggers the feeling of being an imposter. So here's the big reframe. That feeling of being a fraud, it's actually hard evidence that you're on the right track. The anxiety is your entry ticket to genuine mastery. Think about it. If you were a true imposter, you wouldn't even be worried enough to feel this way. So if it's a good sign, why does it feel so bad? Well, it's because you're refusing to pay what we can call the novice tax. Imagine an accomplished surgeon, an expert in her field, trying to learn to bake bread for the first time. The clumsy, awkward feeling of being a beginner is almost unbearable for her. Your ego just can't stand the gap between your high standards and your current, messy beginner abilities. Okay, so we know the brain is lying to us to save energy, and we know this anxiety is just the novice tax. So, how do we actually override that feeling when it hits? Let's get tactical. Let's talk about a system called the evidence protocol. Here's the thing: you cannot argue with the feeling. It's like trying to fight a ghost, but what you can do is overwhelm it with data. The process is super simple. When that panic hits, you grab a piece of paper. First, write down the specific, nasty accusation your brain is making. Then, you become your own defense attorney, and you list only the cold, hard, objective facts. And here's exactly what that looks like. You've got two columns: the lie versus the evidence. The lie your brain is feeding you is, I am entirely unqualified for this job. Okay, what's the objective evidence? I was hired by a panel of 3 experts who reviewed my resume. The feeling says, my art is terrible. The facts say I've successfully completed 3 previous projects on time. It's all about separating the emotional fiction from the objective reality. You have to remember this. Your feelings are just suggestions coming from your lazy, energy conserving brain. They are not a subpoena. They have no legal authority over you. So stop treating your anxiety like it has the power to overrule the actual evidence in the room. Okay, the final piece of the puzzle is to build up an immunity. If your imposter syndrome is triggered by the fear of making a mistake, then the cure is to intentionally make mistakes, just to prove to your brain that they aren't fatal. This is the practice of voluntary incompetence. And let's be crystal clear about something. Perfectionism is not a badge of honor. I love this quote. It's just your imposter syndrome all dressed up for a fancy party. It's the exact same fear of being exposed, but with fancier, higher standards. And to break it, you have to be willing to look a little foolish. So here's how you do it. You lower the stakes all the way down to zero. If you're starting a YouTube channel, your goal is not to make a viral hit. Your goal is to make a bad video and hit publish. If you're learning to code, your goal is to write messy, inefficient code that just barely works. See? By giving yourself explicit permission to produce garbage, you remove the threat of failure. Your brain stops fighting you, the energy starts to flow, and you can actually start learning. At the end of the day, imposter syndrome is a ghost. It only has power when you run from it. The moment you turn around and ask it for some hard evidence, poof, it vanishes. And that leaves us with a new, much more powerful mindset. This right here, this is the whole story. You are not a fraud who's been found out. You are a beginner who is in the process of learning. That's it. That is all that's happening. So, from now on, when you feel that resistance, that friction, that total awkwardness, do not interpret it as a sign to stop. Recognize it for what it truly is. That clunky, difficult feeling, that's the feeling of new neural pathways being built in your brain. That is what growth actually feels like. So, that really just leaves one last question. To get started, to build your immunity, to finally pay that novice tax and get on with it, what piece of glorious, imperfect, wonderful garbage will you give yourself permission to create first?